I'm Emma, 29 years old, and I never thought I'd be the villain of our family vacation to Maine. It was supposed to be a perfect getaway at a lakeside cabin, but instead, I became the target of blame simply because I stood up for my mother's health when no one else would. The bitter words, "You ruined our vacation," still echo in my mind, especially for my sister Melissa, who couldn't see past her own desires. Family can be your greatest support or your deepest wound. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories of family struggles and healing. Growing up in our middle-class household in Connecticut, the dynamics between me, my sister Melissa, and our parents were established early. Melissa, now 33, was always the golden child. With her outgoing personality and ability to charm everyone she met, my parents, Diane and Richard, gravitated toward her naturally. I don't blame them. Melissa lights up a room when she enters. She's the kind of person who makes friends at the grocery store checkout line and gets invited to parties by people she just met. My father especially adored her, always laughing at her jokes and prioritizing her needs. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. While Melissa was out winning swim meets and being crowned prom queen, I was helping Mom with dinner, making sure Dad's shirts were ironed for work, and maintaining a steady 3.8 GPA that nobody particularly celebrated. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, they did, but there was always an unspoken expectation that I would be the reliable one, the one who wouldn't cause trouble or need attention. As we grew into adulthood, these roles only solidified. Melissa moved through 3 different college majors before settling on communications, with our parents funding each transition without complaint. When she wanted to spend a year finding herself in Europe after graduation, they helped with that too. Meanwhile, I worked part-time through college, graduated with an accounting degree, and immediately secured a position at a respectable firm in Hartford. My achievements were acknowledged with quiet nods rather than celebration. The past 2 years had brought significant changes to our family. Mom's health had begun deteriorating due to complications from type 2 diabetes. Her condition required daily medication, regular monitoring of blood sugar levels, and occasional doctor visits when things became unstable. Dad tried to help, but he was often overwhelmed by the medical details. That responsibility fell to me, researching her condition, organizing her medications, and driving her to appointments when necessary. Melissa would call occasionally to check in, but her life in Boston kept her busy with her marketing job and active social life. Her concern was genuine but fleeting. She had a habit of asking how Mom was doing and then immediately shifting the conversation to her latest dating drama or work conflict. The idea for the family vacation came from Melissa during one of our rare family dinners 3 months ago. Mom had been having a particularly difficult time with her health, and Melissa suggested that what everyone needed was a change of scenery to reset. "We should rent that cabin in Maine that the Andersons went to last summer," she said excitedly. "It's right on the lake, totally peaceful. Mom could rest, Dad could fish, and we could all just relax together for once." The idea took hold immediately. Dad nodded enthusiastically, and Mom's eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "That sounds wonderful," Mom said, reaching for Melissa's hand across the table. "I've been feeling so cooped up lately." I hesitated. Summer was a busy time at my firm, and taking a week off would mean working double time before and after. Plus, there were Mom's health considerations. Would there be medical facilities nearby? Would the cabin be accessible if she had mobility issues? But seeing the hope on Mom's face, I kept these concerns to myself. "Great, it's settled," Melissa declared, already pulling out her phone. "I'll look into booking it next week." But as weeks passed, the actual planning fell to me. Melissa sent links to the cabin rental, but didn't follow through with the booking. Dad talked about fishing but didn't research permits. Mom was excited but tired easily when trying to help plan. So I took over, making lists, booking the cabin, researching nearby medical facilities, planning menus that would accommodate Mom's dietary restrictions, and arranging for time off work. 2 days before we were set to leave, Melissa called me in a panic. "Emma, I completely forgot to request vacation days. Can you call the cabin and see if we can move the trip back a week?" I gripped my phone tightly. Melissa, that's not possible. I've already arranged everything based on the original dates. I've taken time off work, which wasn't easy to get approved. Mom's doctor appointments are scheduled around this trip. But I really want to come, she whined. Can't you figure something out? After a tense conversation, Melissa finally said she'd make it work by taking unpaid time off and facing her boss's disappointment. The way she said it made it sound like she was making a tremendous sacrifice, and part of me felt guilty even though the situation was entirely of her making. The night before our departure, I methodically packed my suitcase, including a separate bag with all of Mom's medications clearly labeled with dosage instructions. I printed maps of the route to the cabin, locations of the nearest hospitals and pharmacies, and a list of local restaurants that could accommodate Mom's dietary needs. I was exhausted but hopeful. Despite the planning stress, I genuinely looked forward to spending quality time with my family away from our regular routines. Maybe this trip would help us connect in ways we hadn't in years. Maybe Dad would finally notice how much I contributed. Maybe Melissa would step up and show more responsibility. With these hopeful thoughts, I finally fell asleep, dreaming of peaceful lake views and harmonious family meals. Little did I know that the reality would be dramatically different, and that this vacation would become a turning point in how I viewed my family and myself. My alarm jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m. on the day of our departure. We had agreed to leave by 8 o'clock to avoid traffic and make the 6-hour drive to Maine with plenty of daylight remaining. I shuffled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face to chase away the lingering fatigue from a restless night of last-minute planning worries. By 6:15, I had double-checked Mom's medication bag, confirming that each pill bottle was properly labeled with clear instructions. I'd created a schedule for her medications that accounted for our travel time and the change in routine. I placed the schedule in a bright red folder that would be impossible to miss. At 7 o'clock, I loaded my bags into my car and drove the short distance to my parents' house, where we would all meet before transferring everything to Dad's SUV for the trip. Mom greeted me at the door in her travel outfit, comfortable pants, and a light sweater despite the summer heat. Diabetes affected her circulation, leaving her perpetually cold. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, hugging me. "I've been up since 5, too excited to sleep." Dad was in the kitchen, studying a fishing magazine and nursing his second cup of coffee. "Morning, Emma," he said with a quick glance up. "Ready for vacation mode?" I smiled and began organizing the cooler with drinks and snacks for the road, including sugar-free options for Mom. The clock ticked past 7:30, and there was still no sign of Melissa. Dad checked his watch with increasing frequency as 8 o'clock approached. At 8:15, Dad finally called her. I could hear Melissa's voice through the phone, bright and unapologetic. "I'm just finishing packing. Give me 30 minutes, tops." Dad sighed, but didn't protest. "All right, we'll wait. Drive safe getting here." I bit my tongue to avoid pointing out that Melissa lived only 15 minutes away and had no reason to be late. Instead, I used the extra time to review our route once more and check that we had all the necessary chargers for phones and Mom's blood glucose monitor. Melissa finally breezed in at 9:10, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying an oversized tote along with her suitcase. "Sorry, everyone. I couldn't decide what shoes to bring, and then I realized I needed to stop for coffee." She held up a takeout cup as evidence. Dad took her bags without comment and began loading them into the SUV. I noticed he had to rearrange everything I had carefully packed to accommodate Melissa's excessive luggage. Mom just smiled indulgently, happy that we were all finally together. By 9:30, we were on the road, more than an hour and a half behind schedule. Melissa immediately claimed the front passenger seat. I get carsick in the back, leaving me in the rear with Mom. I didn't mind. It gave me a chance to keep an eye on her. The drive north was beautiful as suburban landscapes gave way to increasingly rural scenery. Dad played his favorite classic rock station, and Melissa chatted animatedly about her friends and work drama. I gazed out the window, allowing myself to relax slightly as miles passed beneath our wheels. Around noon, we stopped at a roadside diner in Massachusetts. The place had a charming retro aesthetic with chrome fixtures and vinyl booths. Mom checked her blood sugar while I reviewed the menu for suitable options. The grilled chicken salad should be good for you, Mom, I suggested. Light on the dressing. Melissa rolled her eyes. God, Emma, let Mom eat what she wants for once. We're on vacation. It's fine, Mom interjected quickly. The salad sounds perfect. When our food arrived, Melissa immediately complained about her burger. I asked for medium rare, and this is definitely medium well, she pouted, poking at it with her fork. She called the server over and requested a replacement, delaying our meal by another 15 minutes. I noticed Mom looking tired, her face slightly pale. Did you take your noon medication? I asked quietly. She nodded. I'm just a little tired from sitting so long. I'll be fine once we get back on the road. After lunch, we continued north. Melissa dozed in the front seat while I kept Mom company in the back, playing word games to pass the time. The further north we drove, the more spectacular the scenery became. Dense forests lined the highway, occasionally breaking to reveal glimpses of sparkling lakes or rolling hills. We crossed into Maine in the mid-afternoon, and I felt a sense of anticipation building. Despite the delayed start and lunch drama, the vacation still held promise. Around 4:30 p.m., Dad turned onto a narrow road that wound through pine forests. After several miles of increasingly remote terrain, we rounded a bend and caught our first glimpse of the cabin. It was more beautiful than the photos had suggested. Perched on a gentle slope overlooking a vast, clear lake, the log cabin featured a wraparound deck and large windows that reflected the water's shimmer. Tall pines surrounded it, providing privacy and shade. A small dock extended into the lake, with a rowboat tied alongside it. Oh my, Mom breathed, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. It's perfect. Even Melissa sat up straighter, putting away her phone for the first time in hours. Wow, the Andersons weren't exaggerating. This place is gorgeous. Dad parked in the gravel driveway, and we all climbed out, stretching after the long drive. The air smelled of pine and clean water, significantly cooler and fresher than back home. For a moment, we stood together, taking in the view and the peaceful silence, broken only by birdsong and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. The moment of family unity was brief, but powerful. I felt a surge of optimism. Maybe this was exactly what we all needed. I took charge of unloading the car, directing Dad and Melissa to carry bags inside while I organized our supplies. The cabin's interior was as impressive as its setting. Knotty pine walls, comfortable furniture, a stone fireplace, and a kitchen that opened to a dining area with lake views. 3 bedrooms branched off from the main living space, along with 2 bathrooms. I call the room with the lake view, Melissa announced immediately. Dad nodded. Your mother and I will take the master bedroom. Emma, you're okay with the small room in the back, right? It wasn't really a question. I nodded and carried my bag to the smallest bedroom, which overlooked the driveway rather than the lake. The room was perfectly adequate, clean and cozy with a comfortable-looking twin bed and a small dresser. I unpacked quickly, then set about organizing Mom's medication station on the kitchen counter, arranging pill bottles, her glucose monitor, and the schedule I'd created. By early evening, we were settled in. Dad figured out how to operate the gas grill on the deck, and we enjoyed a simple dinner of grilled chicken and vegetables as the sun began to set over the lake. The water turned to molten gold in the fading light, then deepened to purple as dusk settled around us. This was a wonderful idea, Mom said, squeezing Melissa's hand. Thank you for suggesting it. Melissa beamed, accepting the credit without mentioning my weeks of planning and organization. But in that peaceful moment, with my family around me and the beautiful lake before us, I didn't mind. The vacation was off to a good start, despite the minor hiccups. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I allowed myself to hope that the rest of our time here would bring the family connection I'd been craving. I woke with the sunrise, my body still on work schedule despite the vacation setting. The small bedroom was filled with soft morning light filtering through the simple white curtains. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the cabin, The gentle creaking of the wood, distant birdsong, and the barely perceptible sound of water lapping at the shore. By 7 a.m., I was in the kitchen, coffee brewing and breakfast preparations underway. I'd planned a hearty breakfast of whole-grain pancakes with fresh berries, Mom's favorite, and suitable for her dietary needs if she limited the maple syrup. The cabin's previous occupants had left the kitchen well-stocked with basics, and I'd brought specialty items for Mom's diet. Mom joined me around 7:30, looking rested and moving with more energy than I'd seen in weeks. "Something smells wonderful," she said, accepting the mug of coffee I handed her. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble, Emma." "It's no trouble," I replied truthfully. There was something calming about cooking in this beautiful space with the lake visible through the windows. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Something about the air here." Dad appeared shortly after, dressed in his fishing clothes and eager to try out the lake. He kissed Mom on the cheek and poured himself coffee. "These pancakes for everyone, Emma?" I nodded. "I thought we could all eat together before heading out for the day. I found a trail map yesterday. There's a beginner-friendly hiking path that loops around part of the lake. Should take about 2 hours, perfect for this morning before it gets too hot." "Sounds great," Dad agreed. "I noticed the boat has fishing gear stored in it. Thought I might try my luck after the hike." We had discussed the day's plans over dinner the night before, agreeing to meet for breakfast at 8:00 and leave for the hike by 9 o'clock. But as 8:30 approached, Melissa still hadn't appeared. Mom set aside a plate of pancakes for her while Dad checked his watch with increasing frequency. "Should I go wake her?" I asked finally. Dad shook his head. "Let her sleep. She works hard and needs her rest." I bit back a response about how we all worked hard. Instead, I began cleaning up the kitchen, wrapping Melissa's portion for later. At 9:15, with still no sign of Melissa, Dad started to show signs of impatience. "Maybe we should just head out. She can catch up with us if she wakes up." Mom looked torn. "But she'll be disappointed to miss the hike. Let's wait a little longer." We compromised by preparing for the hike, filling water bottles, applying sunscreen, and gathering the trail map and a small first aid kit I'd packed. By the time we were ready, it was nearly 10:00, and the morning's coolness was already giving way to summer heat. Just as we were about to leave without her, Melissa finally emerged from her bedroom, yawning and stretching in pajamas. "Morning, everyone," she said casually, as if we hadn't been waiting for 2 hours. "We were about to leave for the hike," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Melissa blinked. "Oh, right, the hike. Sorry, I completely forgot. Give me 15 minutes to get ready." 15 minutes stretched to 30 as Melissa showered, changed, and finally joined us, her hair perfectly styled despite the upcoming physical activity. By then, it was nearly 10:45, and the temperature had risen significantly. "We'll need to shorten the route," I said, studying the map. "It's getting too hot for the full loop, especially for Mom." Melissa frowned. "But I wanted to see the lookout point that was mentioned in the cabin guidebook." "We can try again tomorrow if we start on time," I suggested, avoiding looking directly at her. The abbreviated hike was still pleasant, with the trail winding through fragrant pine forests and occasionally opening to stunning lake views. Mom moved slowly but steadily, and I stayed close to her, watching for any signs of fatigue or distress. Dad ranged ahead with Melissa, their conversation punctuated by her bright laughter. About halfway through the hike, I noticed Mom's pace slowing further, her breathing becoming labored. "Let's take a break," I suggested, guiding her to a fallen log that offered a makeshift bench. She sank down gratefully. "Just need to catch my breath. It's been a while since I've done this much walking." I handed her a water bottle and discreetly checked her for other symptoms. Her face was flushed from exertion, but not alarmingly so. "How do you feel otherwise? Any dizziness or unusual fatigue?" "I'm fine, Emma," she assured me, though I noticed she drank the water eagerly. "Just out of shape. Don't worry so much." Dad and Melissa had noticed our stop and doubled back. "Everything okay?" Dad asked, his brow furrowed. "Just taking a short rest," Mom replied before I could speak. enjoying the scenery. The rest of the hike was taken at a slower pace, with more frequent breaks. By the time we returned to the cabin, it was past noon, and the day had grown genuinely hot. Mom went to lie down, insisting she was just tired from the exercise. I checked her blood sugar levels before she napped, slightly elevated but not dangerously so. Dad headed out to try fishing from the dock, and Melissa announced she was going to sunbathe. I used the time to prepare a light lunch for when Mom woke up and to plan the next day's activities with more realistic timing. Around 2:00 p.m., we gathered for lunch on the deck. Mom looked refreshed after her nap, and the tension from the morning's delays seemed to have dissipated. Dad proudly showed pictures of a small bass he'd caught and released. I thought we could try that seafood restaurant in town for dinner tonight, I suggested. The reviews are great, and they have plenty of options that would work for Mom's diet. Actually, Melissa interjected, I met some people while I was sunbathing on the dock. Local guys with a boat who know all the best spots around the lake. They recommended a different place, the Lobster Trap, supposed to be the best seafood for miles. Did you check if they have menu options for diabetics? I asked. Melissa rolled her eyes. Not everything has to revolve around dietary restrictions, Emma. I'm sure they have salads or something. Dad, predictably, sided with Melissa. The Lobster Trap sounds great. It's good to get recommendations from locals. I let it go, making a mental note to check the restaurant's menu online before we left. Mom caught my eye and gave a small shrug that seemed to say, it's not worth arguing about. After lunch, Melissa disappeared into her room to freshen up, emerging an hour later in a new outfit with her makeup redone. By the way, she announced casually, I might not join you all tomorrow for the lighthouse tour. The guys I met invited me to go out on their boat. But we planned this together, Mom said, a note of disappointment in her voice. I was looking forward to all of us seeing the lighthouse. I know, Mom, but how often do I get to go boating with cute local guys? You understand, right? Melissa's tone was wheedling, the same one she'd used successfully throughout childhood to get her way. I guess so, Mom conceded. Just be careful with strangers, honey. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Melissa, we came here for family vacation. We've only been here one day, and you're already making separate plans? Don't be so controlling, Emma, Melissa snapped. Just because you have no social life doesn't mean I have to be glued to the family 24/7. That's enough, Dad intervened, but his tone was milder than if I had spoken to Melissa that way. Melissa can spend one day doing her own thing. We'll still have plenty of family time. The exchange left a sour taste in my mouth. As we prepared to leave for dinner, I caught Melissa texting rapidly, a small smile playing on her lips. She was already mentally checked out of family time, and we'd barely begun our vacation. The Lobster Trap turned out to be a touristy establishment with long wait times and a limited menu. Mom struggled to find suitable options and eventually settled for a plain grilled fish that came out dry and overcooked. Melissa dominated the dinner conversation with stories about her job and friends in Boston, barely asking questions about anyone else's life. Dad encouraged her, laughing at her anecdotes and asking follow-up questions, while Mom smiled tiredly and picked at her food. I sat quietly, observing the family dynamics I'd known all my life playing out in this new setting. Melissa at the center of attention, Dad facilitating her spotlight, Mom peacekeeping, and me on the periphery. I'd hoped the change of scenery might shift these patterns, but so far, the vacation was only reinforcing them. Back at the cabin, Melissa announced she was going to take a moonlight walk along the shore. Don't wait up, she called as she headed out the door, phone in hand. I suspected she was meeting up with her new friends. Dad turned on the television to catch a baseball game, and Mom settled beside him with a book. I retreated to my small bedroom, lying awake and listening to the unfamiliar night sounds of the lake, wondering if I was the only one who felt the undercurrent of tension beneath our supposed vacation idyll. The third morning of our vacation dawned bright and clear. I woke early again, checking the weather forecast on my phone. Perfect conditions for the boat trip we had reserved weeks ago. A local tour company offered a 3-hour cruise around the lake, pointing out wildlife and historical sites. Mom had been particularly excited about this activity, as it required minimal exertion while still allowing her to experience the natural beauty of the area. I headed to the kitchen to start breakfast, stopping briefly to check on Mom and Dad's closed door. They were still sleeping, which was good. Mom needed the rest. I started coffee and began mixing batter for blueberry muffins, a recipe I knew Mom loved. As the muffins baked, filling the cabin with their sweet aroma, I realized I hadn't heard any movement from Melissa's room either. Given yesterday's pattern, I wasn't surprised. Our boat tour was scheduled for 11:00 a.m., giving us plenty of time for a leisurely breakfast and the short drive to the marina. Mom and Dad emerged around 8:30, drawn by the smell of coffee and fresh baking. Mom looked well-rested, her color good. I discreetly watched as she checked her blood sugar and took her morning medication. "These muffins are wonderful, Emma," she said, selecting one from the cooling rack. "You're spoiling us." Dad poured himself coffee and peered out the window at the lake. "Perfect day for boating." "What time do we need to leave?" "We should head out by 10:15 to be safe," I replied. "The marina is about 20 minutes away, and they asked us to arrive 15 minutes before departure to check in." Dad nodded. "I'll make sure Melissa is up by 9:30. We enjoyed a pleasant breakfast on the deck, watching early morning kayakers glide across the lake's still surface. At 9:30, Dad knocked on Melissa's door but received no answer. He knocked again, louder this time, then cautiously opened the door. "She's not here," he said, returning to the deck with a confused expression. "Bed doesn't look slept in." A flicker of concern crossed Mom's face. "Do you think she's okay? Should we call her?" "I'm sure she's fine," Dad said, though he immediately pulled out his phone to dial her number. After several rings, it went to voicemail. He left a message reminding her about the boat tour. By 10:00, there was still no sign of Melissa, and her continued absence was creating a nervous atmosphere. Dad tried calling again with the same result. "Maybe she stayed with those friends she met," he suggested, though he looked uncomfortable with the idea. Mom's worry was more visible now. "She should have let us know. That's not like her." I refrained from pointing out that it was exactly like Melissa to do what she wanted, without considering others. Instead, I busied myself packing a small cooler with water bottles and snacks for the boat trip. As 10:15 approached, our planned departure time, I noticed something else troubling. "Dad, where are the car keys? We should get going." Dad patted his pockets and frowned. "They should be on the hook by the door where I left them." A quick search confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. The keys were gone, and so was the car. Melissa had taken it without asking, without leaving a note, and without considering that we might need it. Dad's expression darkened. "She knows we have the boat tour today. Why would she take the car without saying anything?" The situation grew more concerning when Mom opened the refrigerator and frowned. "Emma, didn't you put my backup insulin in here? I can't find it." A quick inventory of Mom's medication revealed the problem. Her emergency insulin was missing from its designated spot. It should have been in the refrigerator door, clearly labeled. Most of her daily medications were still in place on the counter, but the insulin she might need in case of a blood sugar spike was gone. With a sinking feeling, I realized it must be in the small cooler bag I had packed for emergencies, the same bag that was now in the trunk of our missing car. "I need to call Melissa again," Dad said, his voice tight with anger now. This time, he left a more urgent message. "Melissa, call us immediately. Mom's insulin is in the car and we need it. Plus, we're going to miss our boat reservation." The next hour was tense. We tried calling Melissa repeatedly, each call going to voicemail. Mom insisted she was fine for now. She had taken her regular morning dose and had enough medication for the day as long as her blood sugar remained stable. But the missing emergency insulin was a safety concern we couldn't ignore. At 10:45, I made the decision to cancel our boat tour reservation. The marina was too far to walk, especially in the growing heat of the day, and we couldn't risk missing the boat and losing our deposit. The cancellation fee was substantial, but there was no alternative. "I'm sorry about the tour, Mom," I said, seeing her disappointment. "Maybe we can reschedule for later in the week." Mom patted my hand. It's not your fault, dear. I'm more concerned about Melissa. This isn't responsible behavior. Dad paced the deck, alternating between calling Melissa and staring down the road as if he could make the car appear through sheer will. His mood shifted between worry and anger. When she gets back, we're going to have a serious conversation about consideration for others, he muttered. My primary concern was Mom's medication. While she wasn't in immediate danger, I didn't like having her emergency supplies inaccessible. After some research on my phone, I discovered there was a small pharmacy in the town about 2 miles away. It might be possible to get a temporary emergency prescription filled if necessary. I'm going to see about getting to town, I announced. We need to have backup insulin just in case. Dad looked ready to object, likely to suggest waiting longer for Melissa, but Mom nodded firmly. That's a good idea, Emma. Better safe than sorry. I found a water taxi service listed online that could pick us up from our dock and take us to the town marina. The cost was more than I wanted to spend, but this was about Mom's health. 20 minutes and a phone call later, a small motorboat pulled up to our dock, operated by a weathered local man who introduced himself as Ray. Need a lift to town, folks, he called. I helped Mom into the boat while explaining the situation to Ray. He was sympathetic and offered to wait while we visited the pharmacy, then bring us back to the cabin. The boat ride to town was beautiful despite the circumstances, with Ray pointing out local landmarks and a family of loons gliding across the water. At the pharmacy, I explained our situation and the pharmacist was understanding. Mom had her medical information stored in her phone, which helped expedite the process. While they couldn't provide a full replacement, they were able to give us enough emergency insulin to last the remainder of our vacation. The cost was high without our regular insurance coverage, but I paid without hesitation. Ray waited as promised and ferried us back to the cabin. As we approached our dock, I felt a mixture of relief about securing the medication and simmering frustration about the circumstances that had made it necessary. We returned to the cabin around 2:30 p.m. to find the car still missing and no sign of Melissa. Mom was beginning to look tired from the outing, so I helped her to the couch for a rest while Dad resumed his anxious pacing and phone calls. Finally, at nearly 4 p.m., we heard the sound of tires on gravel. Through the window, I saw our car pull up with Melissa at the wheel. She emerged looking relaxed and happy, wearing a new sun I hadn't seen before and carrying shopping bags. Dad met her at the door. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We've been calling you for hours." Melissa looked genuinely surprised. "My phone died, and I forgot my charger. Did you need something? Did we need something?" I interjected, unable to contain myself. "We had a boat tour scheduled for today, the one we've been planning for weeks. You took the car without telling anyone with Mom's insulin in it." Melissa's expression shifted from surprise to defensive irritation. How was I supposed to know her insulin was in the car? And I thought the boat thing was tomorrow. "Even if it was tomorrow, you don't take our only vehicle without letting anyone know," Dad said. "We were worried about you, and we needed the car." Mom joined us, moving slowly from her rest on the couch. "Honey, my emergency medication was in the cooler in the trunk. We didn't know where you were or when you'd be back." For a brief moment, Melissa looked contrite. "I'm sorry about the insulin, Mom. I didn't know." Then, her expression brightened. "But look what I found in town." She held up her shopping bags. "The cutest boutique with local crafts. I bought you a handmade scarf, Mom." The swift change of subject was classic Melissa: deflect, distract, and charm her way out of accountability. Usually it worked, especially with Dad. But this time, the issue was too serious to gloss over with gifts. "Melissa," I said firmly, "we had to hire a water taxi to get to town so we could get emergency medication. We lost our deposit on the boat tour. This isn't about forgetting or your phone dying. It's about basic consideration for others, especially Mom's health needs." "You're overreacting as usual," Melissa snapped. "Mom is fine. Nothing happened. And I said I was sorry about the insulin, but how was I supposed to know it was in the car?" "You should have asked before taking our only transportation," I insisted. "Or left a note. Or made sure your phone was charged." Any of those would have been the responsible thing to do. Dad stepped between us, his mediator role firmly in place. All right, that's enough. What's done is done. Melissa, please be more thoughtful in the future. Emma, let's move past this. We still have most of the day ahead of us. I noticed he had barely chastised Melissa while asking me to drop the subject. The familiar pattern stung, especially given the seriousness of the situation. Mom, ever the peacemaker, suggested we all have a late lunch on the deck and enjoy the beautiful afternoon. The meal was strained, with Melissa chattering about her shopping discoveries and the charming local men who had given her recommendations for shops and restaurants. She barely acknowledged the worry and inconvenience she had caused, and by dessert, she had shifted the narrative entirely. She had done us a favor by discovering these local gems that weren't in any guidebook. After lunch, I found Mom in her room, sitting on the edge of the bed looking more tired than she had that morning. Are you feeling okay? I asked, instantly concerned. Just a bit run down from all the excitement, she assured me, but I noticed she was checking her blood sugar again. The reading was higher than ideal, likely from the stress of the day. Let me get you some water and your medication, I offered. As I helped Mom with her pills, a wave of protective anger washed over me. This vacation was supposed to help Mom relax and recover some strength, not add stress that affected her health. That evening, I stayed close to Mom, monitoring her condition discreetly. Her blood sugar eventually stabilized, but the incident had left me on high alert. As I helped prepare dinner in the kitchen, I could hear Melissa on the deck, talking and laughing on her phone, presumably with her new local friends. The sound grated on my nerves, but I focused on chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. Dad joined me in the kitchen. Emma, he began awkwardly, I know today didn't go as planned, but try not to be too hard on your sister. She's young and enjoying her vacation. She's 33, Dad, I replied quietly, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry to the deck. That's not young when it comes to basic responsibility and consideration for others. Mom could have had a serious issue today. Dad sighed. I know, and I've spoken to her about it. But you know how she is. The more we push, the more she pushes back. Let's just try to salvage the rest of the vacation, okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further without saying something I might regret. But as I continued preparing dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that a line had been crossed today, and that worse was yet to come. The fourth day of our vacation dawned overcast, with a hint of humidity that suggested possible afternoon thunderstorms. The weather matched my mood, heavy with unresolved tension from yesterday's events. Still, I was determined to make the most of our family time, especially for Mom's sake. I'd planned a picnic for today, knowing Mom enjoyed outdoor meals, but needed to avoid excessive exertion. There was a perfect spot just a short walk from our cabin. A grassy clearing with picnic tables overlooking a quiet cove. Close enough for Mom to manage easily, but scenic enough to feel special. By 9 a.m., I was in the kitchen preparing picnic foods, carefully including options that would work with Mom's dietary needs. Whole grain sandwiches with lean protein, fresh fruit, and homemade bean salad that was flavorful without being too high in sugar or salt. I also packed Mom's medication, extra water, and a small first aid kit. Yesterday's experience had reinforced my caution about being prepared. Dad emerged from the master bedroom around 9:30, kissing Mom's cheek as she followed him into the kitchen. Something smells great, he commented, peering over my shoulder at the food preparation. Picnic lunch, I explained. I thought we could walk to that little cove we spotted on our first day. It's an easy walk for Mom, and the tables are in a shaded area. Mom smiled appreciatively. That sounds lovely, Emma. What can I do to help? I set her up with the simple task of wrapping the prepared sandwiches in wax paper while I finished the salads and packed the cooler. Dad volunteered to find the cabin's stash of picnic supplies, plates, utensils, and a tablecloth. Once again, there was no sign of Melissa as the morning progressed. After yesterday, I decided not to count on her participation in family activities, but Mom still knocked gently on her door around 10:15. Melissa, honey? We're planning a picnic lunch if you'd like to join us. To my surprise, Melissa's door opened almost immediately. She was already dressed and groomed, checking her phone with one hand as she responded. A picnic? Sure, I could do that. What time are we going? Mom looked pleased. We were thinking around 11, if that works for you? Perfect, Melissa replied, her attention still partly on her phone. That gives me time to finish answering these work emails. I felt a flicker of hope that today might proceed more smoothly than yesterday. Perhaps Melissa had reflected on her behavior and decided to be more engaged with the family. By 10:45, all the picnic preparations were complete, and we were ready to head out once Melissa joined us. At 11:05, Melissa finally emerged from her room. Ready, she announced cheerfully. Then, glancing at her phone again, she added, "Oh, by the way, I hope it's okay. I invited a couple of people to join us. They're bringing some local craft beer they thought Dad might like to try." My hope for a peaceful family day deflated instantly. You invited strangers to our family picnic? Without asking anyone? Melissa rolled her eyes. They're not strangers. They're the guys I met the other day, Jake and Troy. And Jake's sister Aubrey is coming too. They're locals who know all the best spots around here. Dad, predictably, seemed unbothered by the last-minute additions. The more the merrier, right? And craft beer sounds great. Mom looked less certain, but nodded supportively. Of course, it's fine. I'll just grab a few more plates. I bit my tongue and recalculated the food I'd prepared. It would stretch to accommodate 3 more people, but just barely. More concerning was the fact that Melissa had once again made a unilateral decision affecting all of us, without consultation or consideration. We set out for the picnic spot, me carrying the heavy cooler while Dad managed the picnic basket and folding chairs. Mom walked slowly but steadily, and Melissa strolled alongside her, chatting about the local attractions her new friends had recommended. The picnic area was as lovely as I remembered, a grassy clearing with sturdy wooden tables, shade trees, and a spectacular view of a quiet cove where the water was so clear you could see fish swimming near the shore. I set up our spot, spreading the tablecloth and arranging the food, while Dad helped Mom get comfortable in one of the chairs we'd brought. Melissa checked her phone. They should be here any minute. They're coming by boat, said they'd dock at the small pier just down there. She pointed to a wooden dock extending into the cove about 50 yards from our picnic table. Sure enough, within minutes, we heard the sound of a motorboat approaching. A sleek craft pulled up to the dock, and 3 people disembarked, 2 men and a woman, all in their late 20s or early 30s. They waved enthusiastically when they spotted Melissa, who waved back with equal excitement. Introductions were made quickly. Jake was tall with sun-bleached hair and the deep tan of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. Troy was shorter but muscular, with a trimmed beard and multiple tattoos visible on his arms. Aubrey, Jake's sister, had the same blonde hair as her brother but styled in a short, fashionable cut. "So great to meet Melissa's family," Jake said, shaking Dad's hand firmly. "She's told us all about you." Troy held up a 6-pack of beer in brown bottles with handwritten labels. "Local brewery just started up last year. Best IPA in Maine, if you ask me." Dad looked delighted, immediately engaging Troy in conversation about brewing techniques. Mom smiled politely as Aubrey sat beside her, asking questions about our cabin and how we were enjoying our vacation. Melissa hovered between the groups, clearly pleased with herself for facilitating these connections. I busied myself setting out the food, trying to rearrange it to accommodate the additional people. As I worked, I overheard snippets of conversation. Jake was describing his work as a seasonal fishing guide, while Troy apparently managed vacation properties around the lake. Aubrey mentioned something about working remotely as a graphic designer. The picnic began pleasantly enough. The local beer was indeed excellent, according to Dad, who was soon deep in conversation with Troy about fishing spots. Mom seemed to be enjoying Aubrey's company, though I noticed she was eating less than usual, possibly self-conscious about her dietary restrictions with strangers present. Trouble began about 20 minutes into the meal when Jake, who had been watching Mom decline certain foods, asked bluntly, "Are you on some kind of special diet?" Melissa mentioned something about health issues. Mom looked uncomfortable with the direct question. Just managing diabetes, she said quietly. Nothing to worry about. My uncle had diabetes, Jake continued, seemingly oblivious to Mom's discomfort. Lost a foot to it eventually. Nasty disease. Mom's face paled, and I intervened quickly. We manage it very carefully, I said firmly. Mom's doing great with her treatment plan. But Jake wasn't finished. You should try this natural supplement my uncle started taking. Really helped with his blood sugar. I can get you some while you're here. My buddy sells it. That's very kind, Mom replied diplomatically, but I prefer to stick with my doctor's recommendations. Jake shrugged. Suit yourself, but these pharmaceutical companies just want to keep you sick and dependent on their drugs. The natural stuff works better and doesn't have all those side effects. I felt a surge of protective anger. This stranger was giving dangerous medical advice to my mother within minutes of meeting her. Before I could respond, however, Melissa jumped in. Jake owns a health food store in town, she explained, as if that qualified him to give medical advice. He knows a lot about alternative treatments. The conversation shifted as Troy produced a flask of what he called homemade moonshine and began pouring small amounts into plastic cups. Dad accepted one, as did Melissa and Aubrey. Mom and I declined politely. As the afternoon progressed, the dynamic became increasingly uncomfortable. Jake, Troy, and Aubrey consumed most of the beer they'd brought plus the moonshine, growing louder and more overbearing. Melissa matched their drinking, giggling at their jokes and seeming to forget we were there except when she wanted to involve us in their stories. Tell them about that time you stole your dad's car in high school, Mel. Troy encouraged, using a nickname I'd never heard anyone call my sister. Melissa launched into a story I'd never heard before about apparently taking Dad's car without permission when she was 16 and going to a party. The way she told it made it sound like a hilarious adventure rather than dangerous and illegal behavior. Dad looked uncomfortable, possibly because he had no memory of this incident. I don't remember that happening, he said when she finished. Oh, you never knew. Melissa laughed. I got the car back before you woke up. Mom caught me, but she never told you. Mom frowned. Melissa, that's not. Remember how you made me promise never to do it again, and we kept it our little secret? Melissa continued, cutting Mom off. You were always covering for me. I watched Mom's face, seeing the hurt and confusion there. This story was clearly fabricated, but Melissa was rewriting our family history to impress her new friends. The final straw came when Troy and Jake began tossing a frisbee nearby, becoming increasingly reckless as the alcohol affected their coordination. A wild throw from Troy sent the frisbee crashing onto our table, knocking over drinks and sending food to the ground. Sorry about that, Troy called, not sounding particularly sorry. Neither he nor Jake made any move to help clean up the mess. As I scrambled to salvage what I could of our picnic, I noticed Mom looking pale and tired. I discreetly checked her blood sugar and found it lower than it should be. She needed to eat something substantial soon. Mom, are you feeling okay? I asked quietly. She nodded but admitted, I'm a bit tired, and I should probably eat something more substantial than these snacks. I turned to the group. I think we should head back to the cabin. Mom needs to rest. Melissa frowned. We just got here. It's barely been 2 hours. Your mom's not looking great, Aubrey commented, more observant than her brother and friend. Maybe you should take her back. Jake waved dismissively. She's fine. Just give her one of those granola bars. The casual dismissal of Mom's health needs by this stranger was the last straw. I stood up, my voice firm. We're going back now. Mom needs proper food and rest. Melissa looked embarrassed. Emma, stop being so dramatic. Mom, are you really not feeling well, or is Emma overreacting as usual? Mom, never one to create conflict, hesitated. I am a bit tired, she admitted. But you can stay if you want, Melissa. Dad can help me back. Actually, I said, looking pointedly at the mess on the table and ground, I think we should all go. The picnic is pretty much ruined anyway. Melissa glared at me but was interrupted by Troy before she could respond.
Hey, no worries.
Why don't we all head back to your cabin? We can bring the boat around to your dock. Got plenty more beer on board. Alarm bells rang in my head. The last thing Mom needed was 3 intoxicated strangers invading our cabin. That's not necessary, I said firmly. We have plans for the evening. No, we don't, Melissa contradicted. That's a great idea, Troy. You guys can come see our awesome cabin and hang out on the deck. Dad looked torn, glancing between Mom's tired face and Melissa's excited one. To my surprise, he sided with me. I think today isn't the best day for more company. Your mother needs to rest. Melissa's face flushed with anger and embarrassment.
Fine.
But I'm staying with my friends. I'll catch a ride with them. The walk back to the cabin was tense and silent. Dad supported Mom, who was moving more slowly than usual. I carried our picnic supplies, leaving nothing behind despite Troy's assurance that they would clean up later. Once we reached the cabin, I immediately prepared a proper meal for Mom and made sure she took her medication. While Dad helped Mom settle in for a rest, I cleaned up the remaining picnic supplies, my frustration building with every sticky container and wadded napkin. We had planned a simple family picnic, and Melissa had turned it into a chaotic social event with strangers who disrespected our mother's health condition. Around 6 p.m., I heard the sound of a boat approaching our dock. Looking out the window, I saw the same motorboat from earlier, now carrying Melissa, Jake, Troy, and Aubrey. They were laughing loudly as they climbed onto our dock, clearly more intoxicated than they had been at the picnic. Dad came to stand beside me at the window. Looks like Melissa brought her friends back anyway, he observed, his tone unreadable. Dad, Mom needs quiet to rest. These people were disrespectful about her health, and they're clearly drunk. We can't have them here. Dad sighed. Let me talk to Melissa. He went out to the dock while I stayed by the window, watching. I could see Dad speaking to Melissa, who responded with animated gestures that suggested disagreement. After a minute, Dad turned to Jake and said something that made the other man shrug. Then, to my dismay, Dad seemed to relent, gesturing toward the cabin in what looked like an invitation. Minutes later, the whole group trooped onto our deck, Melissa leading the way with a triumphant expression. Dad followed, looking resigned. Troy carried more beer, and Jake had a portable speaker already blaring music. Mom's trying to rest, I said as they entered, keeping my voice level with effort. We'll keep it down, Melissa promised, though the volume of her voice belied her words. We're just going to hang out on the deck. You don't have to join us if you're going to be a buzzkill. The next hour was excruciating. From the kitchen, where I prepared a light dinner for the family, I could hear the increasing volume of music, laughter, and conversation from the deck. Mom emerged from the bedroom, looking troubled by the noise, but unwilling to complain. When Aubrey came inside to use the bathroom, she paused by the kitchen. Your sister is something else, she commented. She told us you guys are loaded, said your dad owns some big company back home. I stared at her in confusion. That's not true. My dad is a high school science teacher. Aubrey looked surprised.
Oh.
She said you guys own multiple vacation homes and were thinking of buying property up here. The realization that Melissa was lying to impress these people added another layer to my frustration. When Aubrey rejoined the group outside, I heard Troy's voice carrying through the open deck door. So, when are you going to cook that fancy dinner you promised us, Mel? I'm starving. Melissa's reply was clearly audible. Emma will make something for everyone. She loves playing house mother. It's her whole personality. That was when I reached my breaking point. I walked onto the deck, where the 4 of them were lounging with drinks while Dad sat uncomfortably at the edge of the group. Melissa, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. Can I speak with you inside, please? She rolled her eyes dramatically for her friend's benefit. Whatever it is, just say it here.
Fine, he replied.
I'm not cooking dinner for your friends. In fact, I think they should leave. Mom isn't feeling well. Their noise is disturbing her rest, and frankly, they've been disrespectful since they arrived. Jake sat up straighter. Whoa, that's harsh. We're just having a good time. At our family cabin, during our family vacation, while my mother who has health issues is trying to rest, I pointed out. Melissa invited you without consulting anyone, and you've overstayed your welcome. Melissa jumped to her feet. You don't get to decide who's welcome here. This is Dad's cabin rental, not yours. Dad cleared his throat. Actually, Emma has a point. It is getting late, and your mother needs quiet. Melissa's face flushed with anger. You're taking her side? After I finally made some friends who could show us the best parts of this place? Troy stood up, swaying slightly. No worries. We can tell when we're not wanted. Come on, Mel, grab your stuff. You can crash at my place tonight. That suggestion created an entirely new problem. Melissa, you are not going to a stranger's house to crash after drinking all day, I said firmly. I'm 33 years old. You don't get to tell me what to do. Melissa shouted, loud enough that I was certain Mom could hear from inside. Dad finally took a stand. Melissa, you're staying here tonight. Your friends need to leave. What followed was an ugly scene. Melissa alternated between arguing and pleading, while her friends gathered their things with obvious annoyance. Jake muttered something about uptight family as he collected his speaker. Troy tried to convince Melissa to leave with them one more time, but Dad physically stepped between them, his teacher's authority finally making an appearance. After they departed, Melissa stormed to her room and slammed the door. Dad slumped into a deck chair, looking exhausted. I went inside to check on Mom, finding her sitting at the kitchen table with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry about all that, I said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. This isn't how I imagined our family vacation, she said softly. I just wanted us all to spend time together and enjoy each other's company. As I comforted Mom, the weight of the past 4 days settled heavily on me. The pattern was clear. Melissa would continue to prioritize her own desires over family needs. Dad would enable her until pushed to the absolute limit, and Mom and I would be expected to accommodate and forgive without complaint. But for the first time, I was questioning whether I wanted to participate in this dynamic any longer. The morning of our 5th day at the lake dawned gray and drizzly, the weather matching the mood inside the cabin. Mom and Dad were having coffee at the kitchen table when I emerged from my room, their conversation stopping abruptly as I entered. Melissa's door remained firmly closed. Good morning, I said, pouring myself coffee and joining them. How are you feeling today, Mom? Better after a full night's rest, she replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The strain of yesterday's events was visible in the slight slump of her shoulders. Dad cleared his throat. I was thinking we could drive to that lighthouse today, the one in the guidebook. The rain is supposed to clear by noon. I nodded, appreciating his attempt to salvage something of our vacation. That sounds nice. The views are supposed to be spectacular, and they have a small museum about the area's maritime history. The tentative peace was shattered when Melissa finally emerged around 10 a.m., looking hungover but defiant. She poured coffee and leaned against the counter rather than joining us at the table. Morning, she said flatly. What's the plan for today? Dad explained the lighthouse idea, his tone carefully neutral. Melissa listened, sipping her coffee, then said, Actually, I made other plans. Jake and Troy are picking me up at noon. They're taking me to this hidden beach that only locals know about. The same people who had been asked to leave just last night were now expected to be welcomed back. I exchanged a glance with Dad, who looked troubled but hesitant to create more conflict. Melissa, Mom began gently, we'd really like to do something as a family today. We've barely spent any time all together on this trip. We've been together plenty, Melissa countered. I'm allowed to have some fun on my vacation too, you know. Of course you are, Dad said placatingly. But after yesterday what? Melissa interrupted. After Emma was rude to my friends and embarrassed me? After you kicked them out like they were criminals instead of people just trying to show us a good time? Dad's placating approach clearly wasn't working, so I decided to be more direct. After they disrespected Mom's health needs, drank excessively on our property, and left us to clean up their mess, I said. Those people aren't friends, Melissa. You met them 3 days ago. Melissa rolled her eyes. Here we go again with Saint Emma. the guardian of all things proper and responsible. Some of us actually know how to have fun and make connections with new people. This isn't about fun, I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. It's about respect for the family and consideration for Mom's needs. We came here for a family vacation, and you've spent most of it avoiding us or bringing strangers into our space. Oh, please, Melissa scoffed. Mom is fine. You're just being controlling, as usual. Dad intervened. Let's all calm down. Melissa, we would really appreciate it if you'd join us for the lighthouse today. Your friends can wait until tomorrow. Melissa hesitated, possibly because the request came from Dad rather than me. For a moment, I thought she might agree. Then her phone chimed with a text message. She checked it, and her expression hardened. They're already on their way. I can't cancel now. Yes, you can, I said. You can text them back and explain that you're spending the day with your family. I don't want to, Melissa shot back. I want to go to this beach with people who are actually fun to be around. Mom's soft voice cut through the tension. Melissa, honey, I've been looking forward to the lighthouse. I thought we could take some family photos there. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. For a brief moment, Melissa looked conflicted. Then she squared her shoulders. I'm sorry, Mom, but I already committed to this. They're bringing a picnic and everything. I'll do the lighthouse thing with you another day. There won't be another day, I pointed out. We're leaving in 2 days, and tomorrow is supposed to be stormy. Well, that's not my fault, is it? Melissa retorted. Maybe you should have planned better. The unfairness of that statement, when I had done all the planning for this trip, was the final straw. Years of built-up resentment and frustration broke through my usual restraint. I did plan, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. I planned this entire vacation while you did nothing. I researched activities that would work for Mom's health needs. I packed her medications and monitored her condition. I made restaurant reservations and scheduled tours. I even packed special foods that she can eat safely. Melissa looked taken aback by my outburst, but quickly recovered. Nobody asked you to do all that. You just like controlling everything. No, I countered, years of unspoken thoughts finally finding voice. I do it because someone has to be responsible, and it's never going to be you, is it? Not when you were 16 and Dad had to pick you up from parties where you were drunk. Not when you were 22 and Mom and Dad had to pay off your credit card debt. And not now at 33 when you can't even be bothered to show up on time for family activities. Emma, Dad warned, but I was beyond stopping. Do you have any idea what Mom's been through this year with her health? Do you know how scared she was when she was hospitalized in March? Of course you don't, because you sent flowers instead of visiting, then called for 5 minutes before you had to rush to a party. Melissa's face flushed. That's not fair. I live in Boston. I can't just drop everything every time Mom has a health issue. I live an hour further away than you do, I pointed out. But I managed to be there. I always manage to be there, because that's what family does. So I'm not family now? Melissa's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. You're family when it's convenient for you, I replied. When you need money, or a place to stay, or someone to listen to your latest drama. But when the family needs you, when Mom needs you, you're nowhere to be found. Melissa turned to our parents, tears welling in her eyes, tears I recognized as her go-to tactic when confronted with uncomfortable truths. Are you going to let her talk to me like this? Dad looked deeply uncomfortable. Emma, that's enough. Your sister. No, it's not enough, I interrupted, something I rarely did with my father. For years, we've all tiptoed around Melissa's feelings while ignoring everyone else's. We make excuses for her selfishness. We clean up her messes. We rearrange our lives to accommodate her whims. And what has it gotten us? A family vacation where Mom's health is jeopardized, Dad's stressed, and I'm treated like a servant expected to cook and clean for Melissa's random friends. Mom's quiet voice broke through my tirade. Emma, please, I'm sorry, Mom, but it needs to be said. I continued, gentler now. I love all of you, but this dynamic isn't healthy for anyone. Melissa needs to hear that her actions affect others, especially you. Melissa's tears had turned to rage. You think you're so perfect, don't you? The responsible daughter, the good one. Well, guess what? Everyone is sick of your controlling, judgmental attitude. You don't get to dictate how I live my life or spend my vacation. No, I don't. I agreed. But when your choices directly impact Mom's health and well-being, that's where I draw the line. Mom is fine, Melissa shouted. Stop using her health as an excuse to control everything. At that, Mom herself stood up. I am not fine, she said with unusual firmness. I haven't been fine for months. My blood sugar has been all over the place, I'm constantly tired, and I worry about every bite of food I put in my mouth. This vacation was supposed to be a chance for me to relax and enjoy my family, but instead, I've been stressed and anxious since we arrived. Melissa stared at Mom, momentarily speechless. Dad placed a hand on Mom's shoulder, but she gently shrugged it off. Diane, he began, using her name in that special way reserved for serious moments. No, Richard, Mom said. I need to say this. I love both my daughters equally, but Emma is right about one thing. This vacation has become all about managing Melissa's needs and moods rather than enjoying our time together. Melissa's face crumpled. So you're taking her side? After everything I've done to make this vacation fun? What exactly have you done? I asked incredulously. Name one thing you've contributed to this vacation besides stress and drama. I found this place. Melissa shot back. This was my idea. Finding a cabin online and then doing absolutely nothing to make it happen doesn't count as a contribution, I retorted. Dad paid for it, I booked it, researched activities, packed supplies. You ruined it is what you did. Melissa shouted. You've turned what should have been a fun family vacation into a military operation with your schedules and rules and judgment. You've made everyone miserable with your controlling behavior. Dad finally found his voice. Melissa, that's enough. Emma has worked very hard to make this vacation pleasant for everyone, especially your mother. Melissa turned on him, shocked to find him not automatically taking her side. So, you're against me too now? Perfect Emma has you all brainwashed. No one is against you, Mom said tiredly. We just want you to consider how your actions affect others. My actions? Melissa's voice rose to a near scream. What about her? She jabbed a finger at me. She's the one who embarrassed me in front of my friends. She's the one who treats me like I'm incompetent. She's the one who's ruined this entire vacation with her stick-up-her-ass attitude. The cabin fell silent after her outburst. Dad looked stunned. Mom had tears streaming down her face, and I felt a strange sense of calm clarity descending over me. In that moment, I realized that nothing would change. This pattern was too deeply entrenched, too comfortable for everyone despite the dysfunction. Melissa would continue to be selfish. Dad would continue to enable her. Mom would continue to make peace, and I would continue to pick up the pieces, unless I chose a different path. I'm leaving, I said quietly. What? Mom looked alarmed. Not right now, I clarified. But tomorrow morning I'm going to drive back home. I'll come back to pick you all up at the end of the rental period if you want, or Dad can drive you back. But I can't do this anymore. You're abandoning the family vacation because you didn't get your way? Melissa said incredulously. Talk about childish. I'm removing myself from a situation that's become toxic and unproductive, I corrected her. I came here hoping for quality time with my family, especially Mom. Instead, I've spent the entire time managing crises, being criticized, and watching Mom get increasingly stressed rather than rested. That's not a vacation. It's an extension of the caretaking role I already fulfill at home. Emma, please, Dad started, but I held up a hand. I've made my decision, Dad. I'll help with dinner tonight and breakfast tomorrow, then I'm going to drive back. I have work to catch up on anyway. You can't leave, Mom said, her voice breaking. We need you here. Those words, which would normally have swayed me instantly, now strengthened my resolve. That's exactly the problem, Mom. Everyone here has grown so accustomed to needing me that my own needs have become invisible. I need rest too. I need appreciation. I need to be seen as more than just the reliable one who will always sacrifice herself for everyone else. Melissa wasn't finished. This is so typical, she spat. You set yourself up as the martyr, then blame everyone else when you're unhappy with the role you chose. I didn't choose this role, I replied calmly. It was assigned to me while you were assigned the role of the special one who gets endless passes for bad behavior. But I'm choosing now to step away from it, at least for a few days.
Fine.
Leave, Melissa shouted. You've ruined our vacation anyway with your constant criticism and judgment. Dad finally lost his patience. Melissa, that's enough. Emma has done nothing but try to make this vacation work for everyone, especially your mother. If anyone has ruined things, it's... He cut himself off, but the implication was clear. Melissa gasped, genuinely shocked to hear her father come so close to blaming her. I can't believe this, she said, her voice suddenly small. My entire family has turned against me. No one has turned against you, I said wearily. We just want you to grow up and think about someone besides yourself for once. The sound of a boat motor approaching our dock broke the tense silence that followed. Melissa's phone chimed with a text message. That's Jake and Troy, she said, her voice cold. I'm going with them. Don't wait up. Melissa, please. Mom called as she headed for the door. Stay and talk this through. There's nothing to talk about, Melissa replied without turning around. Emma has made her feelings clear, and apparently you all agree with her. I know when I'm not wanted. With that dramatic exit line, she stormed out of the cabin. Through the window, I could see her hurrying down to the dock, where the now familiar motorboat was waiting. Jake waved enthusiastically, unaware of the family drama he was intersecting. After Melissa departed, the cabin fell into a heavy silence. Mom sank back into her chair, looking utterly drained. Dad paced the living room, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration I'd rarely seen from him. I'll make some fresh coffee, I said, needing something practical to do with my hands. As I measured the grounds and filled the reservoir with water, Dad came to stand in the kitchen doorway. Did you mean what you said about leaving tomorrow? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further without my voice breaking. I'm sorry, Emma, he said, the words coming out haltingly as if he wasn't accustomed to saying them to me. I didn't realize how much pressure you've been under. It's not just this vacation, I replied, keeping my eyes on the coffee maker. It's been our family dynamic for as long as I can remember. I just reached my breaking point. Mom joined us in the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now. I should have seen it, she said softly. I've leaned on you so much, especially since my diagnosis. It wasn't fair. I don't mind helping, Mom, I assured her. I love you, and I want to support you. What I mind is that it's always assumed I'll handle everything while Melissa gets a free pass to do whatever she wants. Mom reached for my hand. I never meant to make you feel taken for granted. I know you didn't, I said, squeezing her hand. But that's what happened, and I need some space to figure out what comes next. The lighthouse trip was quietly abandoned as the three of us spent the afternoon in a strange, subdued state. I prepared a simple dinner, which we ate mostly in silence. The absence of Melissa's usual chatter and drama felt oddly conspicuous, like a missing tooth your tongue keeps finding. As I was cleaning up after dinner, Dad approached me hesitantly. Are you sure about leaving tomorrow? I nodded. I need to. For me. What should I tell Melissa? The question irritated me. Still worried about Melissa's feelings even now, but I kept my tone neutral. Tell her the truth. That I needed some space after our argument. Dad nodded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I've made a lot of mistakes with you girls, he admitted. I thought I was being a good father by keeping the peace, but I was really just enabling bad patterns. The acknowledgement, however late in coming, meant something. It's not too late to change those patterns, Dad. That night, I packed my belongings methodically, leaving out only what I'd need in the morning. As I folded clothes and organized my toiletries, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The decision to leave early was painful but necessary, a declaration of my own worth and needs that had been a long time coming. I went to bed early but lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the lake at night and wondering if I was doing the right thing. Around midnight, I heard the distant sound of a boat motor, Melissa returning, presumably. There were no voices or door slams, just the quiet click of her bedroom door closing. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through my window. I dressed quickly and carried my bags to the car before joining my parents in the kitchen for final breakfast. Melissa's door remained closed. "I made your favorite blueberry pancakes," Mom said, her smile brave, but her eyes sad. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. We ate together, making stilted small talk about the weather and my drive home. As I was helping clear the dishes, Melissa's door finally opened. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking subdued. "You're really leaving?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual edge. "Yes," I replied simply. "I think it's for the best." She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Safe drive." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't an attack either. From Melissa, it was almost conciliatory. The goodbyes were emotional but restrained. Mom hugged me tightly, whispering, "Call me when you arrive safely." Dad's embrace was awkward but heartfelt. Melissa hung back, offering only a stiff nod. As I drove away from the cabin, watching it recede in my rearview mirror, I felt a strange sense of both loss and liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen my own needs over family expectations. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel on my own terms. The small inn I found about 30 miles from our family cabin was nothing special, a standard roadside establishment with clean rooms and a view of pine trees rather than the lake. But it offered something I desperately needed: space to think. After checking in and carrying my single suitcase to the room, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the emotions I'd been controlling wash over me. Tears came, hot and fast, a release of tension and grief for the family vacation that should have been, for the relationship with my sister I'd never had, for the years of feeling invisible despite always being needed. When the wave subsided, I took a long shower, ordered a pizza from the only delivery place in the area, and spent the evening watching mindless television. The simplicity was healing in its own way, no schedule to maintain, no one's needs to anticipate, no tension to navigate. I called Mom as promised to let her know I'd arrived safely. The conversation was brief, but gentle, both of us carefully avoiding mention of Melissa or the argument. "Get some rest," Mom said before hanging up. "You deserve it." The next day, I slept later than I had in years, waking naturally around 9:30 a.m. without an alarm. After a leisurely breakfast at the inn's modest restaurant, I spent the morning catching up on work emails from my room. It wasn't exactly a vacation activity, but it felt productive and normal in a way the cabin experience hadn't. In the afternoon, I drove to a nearby state park and hiked alone, setting my own pace without worrying about accommodating anyone else. The solitude was refreshing rather than lonely. As I stood on a small overlook, watching a hawk circle lazily in the clear blue sky, I realized how rarely I experienced this kind of unstructured freedom. The ability to go where I wanted, when I wanted, answering only to myself. That evening, my phone rang with Mom's number. I answered immediately, a reflexive spike of worry cutting through my newfound peace. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes and no," Mom replied, her voice strained. "I had a bit of a blood sugar issue this afternoon. Nothing too serious, but I was pretty shaky for a while."
Concern flooded me.
"What happened? Did you take your medication? Where was Dad? Is there a doctor nearby you can see?" "Emma, breathe," Mom said gently. "I'm fine now." My blood sugar dropped suddenly, probably from the stress of everything, to be honest. Your father helped me get some juice and crackers, and I stabilized. I wanted to hear your voice. The admission touched me deeply. "I'm glad you called. How are things otherwise?" Mom sighed. "Quiet. Your father took the boat out fishing." "Melissa?" "Well, Melissa has been gone most of the day with those friends of hers." My jaw tightened. "Even after what happened? After your health scare?" "She doesn't know about it," Mom admitted. "She left before it happened, and we haven't seen her since." The old anger flared, but I tamped it down. Mom, maybe you should come join me at this inn. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable, and I could take care of you properly. There was a pause before Mom responded. That's very sweet, but I think I need to stay and see this through with your sister. Running away won't solve the underlying issues. Her words, though not intended as such, felt like a gentle rebuke of my own decision to leave. I didn't run away, I said, more defensively than I intended. I removed myself from a toxic situation. Of course you did, honey, Mom said quickly. And you were right to do it. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. We talked a while longer, Mom filling me in on Dad's fishing success and the family of loons they'd spotted near the dock that morning. By the time we hung up, I felt both better for having talked to her and unsettled by the news of her health episode. The next morning, I woke early and found myself packing my bags without having consciously made the decision to return to the cabin. Something in Mom's voice the night before had triggered my protective instincts. Despite my determination to prioritize my own needs, I couldn't ignore the possibility that Mom might need me. I checked out of the inn and pointed my car back toward the lake, telling myself I was just going to check on Mom and could always leave again if the situation remained unchanged. The drive felt shorter this time, familiarity making the route seem more direct. As I pulled into the cabin's gravel driveway, I was surprised to see only Dad's SUV present. Melissa's rental car was nowhere in sight. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts before heading inside. Dad answered my knock, surprise evident on his face. Emma, we weren't expecting you back. I was worried about Mom after her blood sugar incident, I explained. Is she okay? Dad stepped back to let me in. She's better today. The doctor said it was likely a combination of stress and missing a meal. I stopped in the doorway. Doctor? You took her to a doctor? Dad nodded. I insisted after she nearly fainted yesterday. There's a medical center in town, the same one you researched before we came. They were very helpful. The fact that Dad had taken charge of the situation and followed through on getting Mom medical attention was unexpected but heartening. Where is she now? Resting in the bedroom. The doctor recommended taking it easy today. Dad hesitated, then added, She'll be happy to see you. I carried my bag inside and went directly to the master bedroom. Mom was propped up against pillows, reading a novel. Her face brightened when she saw me. Emma, what a wonderful surprise. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. I was worried after our call yesterday. How are you feeling? Much better, she assured me. Your father has been very attentive. And the doctor was wonderful. She adjusted my medication slightly, which seems to be helping. I glanced around the cabin. Where's Melissa? Mom's expression clouded slightly. She didn't come home last night. She texted your father this morning to say she was staying with her friend Aubrey. The information didn't surprise me, but it still stung to know that Melissa had essentially abandoned the family in the middle of a health crisis. Has she asked about you at all? Mom shook her head. I don't think your father told her I wasn't feeling well. He didn't want to worry her. Or give her the opportunity to demonstrate whether she would care enough to come back, I thought but didn't say. Instead, I asked, Have you eaten lunch yet? I can make you something. Your father brought me soup a little while ago, Mom said, then added with a small smile. It was from a can, but he heated it perfectly. The image of my father, who rarely ventured into cooking territory, carefully preparing canned soup for my mother brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Perhaps my departure had forced some necessary changes in the family dynamic already. I spent the afternoon keeping Mom company, catching her up on my brief solo adventure and listening to her stories about Dad's fishing exploits. She seemed genuinely more relaxed than she had been earlier in the vacation, despite her recent health scare. I had a good talk with your father after you left, she confided when Dad stepped out to buy more ice. I told him some hard truths about how I felt enabling Melissa all these years. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. How did he take it? I asked, genuinely curious. Better than I expected, Mom admitted. I think seeing you stand up for yourself shocked him into reconsidering some things. He admitted he's been unfair to you and far too permissive with Melissa. The acknowledgement was validating, even secondhand. Do you think anything will actually change? Mom squeezed my hand. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially with patterns as old as these. But I believe we've taken the first steps. Early evening brought the sound of a car in the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw Melissa's rental. She entered the cabin alone, stopping short when she saw me sitting with Mom in the living room. "You're back," she said, her tone unreadable. "Mom had a health scare yesterday," I replied, not bothering to soften the information. Her blood sugar dropped dangerously low. Dad had to take her to a doctor. Melissa paled visibly.
What?
"Why didn't anyone call me? Would you have answered?"
I asked.
"Or were you too busy with your new friends to care about your family?" "Emma," Mom warned gently. Melissa's expression cycled rapidly through shock, guilt, and defensiveness. "I would have come back if I'd known," she insisted. "Is she okay? Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm fine now," Mom assured her. "Just tired." The doctor adjusted my medication. Melissa approached hesitantly and perched on the arm of the couch near Mom. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." The apology seemed genuine, which caught me off guard. I had expected more defensiveness, more deflection of responsibility. Mom patted Melissa's hand. "You're here now." Dad returned with the ice and groceries, pausing briefly when he saw Melissa, but offering a neutral greeting. The four of us existed in an awkward truce for the remainder of the evening, everyone careful with their words, the recent conflicts hovering unspoken in the air between us. After dinner, which I prepared while Dad insisted on handling the dishes, Melissa approached me on the deck, where I'd gone for some fresh air. "I didn't know Mom was sick," she said without preamble. "I would have come back." "I believe you," I replied, surprising myself with the realization that I did. Melissa could be selfish and thoughtless, but she loved Mom in her own way. Melissa leaned against the railing, looking out at the lake. "I've been thinking about what you said, about me never taking responsibility, always expecting everyone to accommodate me." I stayed silent, giving her space to continue. "I'm not good at being reliable," she admitted. "Not like you. It's easier to be the fun one, the spontaneous one. No one expects anything from me except entertainment." "That's not entirely true," I said. "Mom and Dad expect you to be an adult who considers others, especially when it comes to Mom's health. And I expect you to be a sister who sees me as a person with needs, not just a convenient resource to handle whatever you don't want to deal with." Melissa nodded slowly. "I can see how I've been taking advantage. Not intentionally, but the result is the same." She turned to face me directly. "I can't promise I'll suddenly become as responsible as you overnight. But I am sorry for how I've treated you, especially on this trip. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more self-awareness than Melissa had ever demonstrated before." "Thank you for saying that." "So where do we go from here?" she asked. "One day at a time," I replied, starting with finishing this vacation with as little drama as possible for Mom's sake. The final 2 days of our family vacation passed in a state of cautious reconciliation. Melissa actually joined us for meals and activities, though she did slip away once to say goodbye to her lake friends. More significantly, she made an effort to help with Mom, offering to get her medications or asking if she needed anything before disappearing to her room. Dad, too, showed subtle but meaningful changes. He consulted me about activities suitable for Mom rather than automatically deferring to Melissa's preferences. He stepped up with practical tasks without being asked. And most importantly, he began to hold Melissa accountable for her commitments, giving her a pointed look when she was late for breakfast on our final day. On the morning of our departure, as we packed the cars and prepared for the journey home, Mom pulled me aside for a private moment.
"Thank you," she said simply.
"For what?" "For having the courage to speak your truth, even when it was painful. Sometimes a family needs a disruption to see the patterns they're trapped in." I hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry I left you." "Don't be," she insisted. That act of self-respect did more to change things than years of silent accommodation ever could. The drive home was split between the 2 cars, Dad and Mom in the SUV, Melissa and I in her rental. The arrangement, suggested by Dad, forced Melissa and me to spend several hours in close quarters, navigating conversation without the buffer of our parents. It was awkward at first, but gradually we found our way to more honest communication than we'd had in years. Melissa admitted feeling jealous of my closeness with Mom, especially since her health issues began. I confessed to resenting her freedom and the way she seemed exempt from family responsibilities. "I've always admired how together you are," Melissa said at one point, surprising me. "You make adulting look effortless." I laughed. "Trust me, it's not. I'm constantly worried I'm doing it wrong." "You? Worried about doing something wrong?" I thought that was my department. The shared laughter felt like the beginning of something new, not a complete resolution, but a crack in the wall that had grown between us over the years. Back home, the changes that began at the lake continued to unfold gradually. 3 months after our eventful vacation, we gathered for family dinner at Mom and Dad's house. Mom's health had stabilized with her adjusted medication, and she looked better than she had in months. The most remarkable change was in our family dynamic. Dad consulted me about important decisions rather than automatically deferring to Melissa. Mom was more forthright about her needs rather than trying to accommodate everyone else first. And Melissa, while still Melissa in many ways, made visible efforts to be more considerate, calling Mom regularly and even remembering Dad's birthday without a reminder. As for me, I discovered that speaking up for myself didn't cause the family to fall apart as I had feared. If anything, it strengthened us by replacing unhealthy patterns with more honest communication. I began setting clearer boundaries around my time and energy, and to my surprise, my family largely respected them. The vacation that I thought had been ruined turned out to be transformative in ways I never expected. By standing up for myself, even when it meant being cast as the villain temporarily, I had initiated necessary changes that benefited everyone. The pain and conflict had been worth it for the healthier family dynamic that emerged. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to love yourself enough to demand respect. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for authentic relationships. And most importantly, that it's never too late to change family patterns that no longer serve anyone well. Our main vacation wasn't the idyllic experience I had planned, but it gave us something more valuable: a new understanding of each other and the courage to create healthier ways of being family. In the end, that was worth more than any perfect vacation could have been. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family, even when it made you temporarily the bad guy? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is set a boundary with those you love the most. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own family journey.